This weekend, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned from his historic visit to Africa. Yet the goal of his trip has been questioned by multiple Israeli officials. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with veteran Middle East observer Amotz Asa to hear about how the Israeli trip will have an influence on the African continent.
It's very important in the sense of consolidation, not in the sense of initiation. Israeli-African ties hark back to the 50s when Golda Meir was foreign minister, and she established that connection with a great vision that said Africa is very close to Israel and potentially is a great magnet of Israeli business and development. And it indeed was established that way back in the 50s, but then in the 70s, in the wake of the 1973 war and Arab oil power at the time, all that almost completely collapsed when all of sub-Saharan Africa, in one fell swoop, severed its ties with Israel. And the situation remained such for several years until in the 1980s, the African countries began to understand that the costs of having severed ties with Israel were higher than the benefits, and they began trickling back here. A process that then accelerated in the 1990s and now comes to full fruition with the ties being fully open and fully restored and increasingly vibrant.
And what do you make of the claims that Israel will benefit diplomatically because Africa has votes in the United Nations Security Council and in other forums? Is that going to actually take place? Are we going to get that support?
I think we can expect a lot more impartiality on the part of the African countries that until now have, as a matter of habit and as a matter of servility, en masse and en bloc and uncritically followed the Arab bloc in voting reflexively against Israel in any United Nations forum on any subject. Now they understand increasingly, first of all, that they benefit very little from this obedience to the anti-Israeli cause, and secondly, that it also questions their independence, because if someone else tells them how to behave, then they emerge and present themselves as actually somebody else's servant. Israel does not request of them to automatically vote with Israel, only to vote about any situation and in any issue according to the issue itself.
The anniversary has come up of 40 years since the Entebbe raid. An historic moment, certainly, for Prime Minister Netanyahu to go back to the site where his brother Yoni was killed, and for these commandos to join him. Does it close a circle on that entire episode?
I think it does. It is clear from the specific Ugandan viewpoint and also from the Pan-African viewpoint that what happened at Entebbe 40 years ago was an encapsulation of a very unpleasant chapter in African history, a chapter whereby Africa was at the behest of very arbitrary and whimsical rulers who were embodied in the personality and the career of Idi Amin. He's gone, that era is gone, and this visit, I think, very much encapsulates this transition.
Now, a number of businessmen, Israeli businessmen, took part in this trip. I know that Israel helps Africa in a lot of ways, with solar energy, with drip irrigation, with other items. But is there any benefit for Israel economically from this visit?
Of course. Africa today is considered the world's most continuously and substantively economically growing continent. There are some serious manifestations there of economic growth and development. And this is besides the fact that Africa is a bottomless repository of raw materials, most of which Israel badly needs and are very close to Israel, which of course cheapens their transshipment. And that is besides the fact, as you mentioned, that Africa has, for Israel, a great deal of potential in terms of what Israel sells.
Amotz Asa-El, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
Thank you, Steve.